Okay. Good morning, everybody. And once again from Mooloolaba Beach, and a cup of coffee in hand, 10 push-ups done. I know most of you in the US, I think it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Tuesday, Chicago. So hopefully you're enjoying a wine or a beer or your last coffee of the day. 7 a.m. here in Australia. I'll share my screen and let's dive straight into it. So the topic today is how to make OKRs successful. And the agenda that was sent out was to talk about the difference between OKRs and KPIs, the difference between good and bad OKRs, and why they should be decoupled from remuneration. And then, of course, the Holy Grail, how you connect it all together from strategy to objectives to key results and the day-to-day execution. So I'll follow those colors as we go through. So let's dive straight in. So the difference between OKRs and KPIs. So OKRs are working on the business rather than in it. So think about capability building. So if you're in a capability building role or a leadership role, you should be really thinking about how to improve the business, whereas KPIs are there to measure so you know what you need to work on, what needs to be improved. So to give you an example, you may be tracking website visitors or say free trials per week, and that's one of your KPIs. And a small company, say 50 people, maybe tracking somewhere like 200 KPIs across the whole business, measuring everything from finance, supply chain, sales, like everything you think of measuring are your KPIs, right? Your performance indicators. So that example, you might notice that the web trials are dropping down instead of going up, or they're not going up at the rate you want them to go up. And then you say, right, we're going to intervene with a new capability and we're going to set an objective for the quarter, the OKR. And what we want to do is we've come up with the idea. What we're going to do is launch a whole new brand or a whole new website or campaign or something to intervene so that that KPI starts trending back up again. So that's the difference. So it's very much working on the business and making those improvements. So it's important too not to then try and retrofit a KPI mindset into OKRs, because then your OKRs are going to become conservative and they're not really going to change the company or the team and build great capabilities for the business. So the next topic was good OKRs versus bad ones. And I've just put an example here together that we can talk to. And I'll just grab a sip of coffee. So here's an example of a good objective. Prove we have demand in Japan. And the reason it's good, it's meaningful in terms of the change it could bring. It's audacious, potentially in this context, and hopefully inspiring. Like, we want to sell into the Japanese market. Let's prove we've got demand into that market. And then the key results against that could be something like member registrations and pre-orders. So notice those key results. You can measure them easily. You can verify it at the end. They're aggressive targets, or should be in that context of whatever this business is. They're very specific, so there's no confusion around what they are, and time bound. So that'll be what you set the period for. Like I said earlier, most companies run quarterly OKRs. Smaller companies and startups may look at monthly, but generally it's quarterly. Or you might have an objective running over 6 to 9 months, and then you're setting key results for each quarter. That's another way to do it as well. So in contrast, poor OKRs or bad OKRs, kind of a little bit vague and doesn't really, if you do it, may not have a major impact on the business. And then the key results follow the same pattern. And when you look at those key results, and I see this quite often, you look at them and you read them and you think, oh, they're just like a bunch of to-do lists, tasks or initiatives or projects, right? So when we see a lot of these coming through, because we're coaching the companies and so forth that are using the stratapp product, so we're seeing a lot of content. And I think the main trap is people just writing these list of things they need to do, a bunch of activities. So let's just go back to the good one on the previous slide. These are not activities or initiatives, these are the outcomes. So to get to member registrations, you might have done a whole lot of projects, right? Launched a website, run a TV campaign, set up a stand in all the shopping centers in Tokyo, whatever it is, right? So there's a number of initiatives and tasks that would have been done below that key result to achieve it. And we'll talk about execution in a moment. It's one of the agenda items. So that's the difference. Good one versus bad one. Okay, so bad one, not measurable, not verifiable, not aggressive or realistic, and not really tying down a outcome versus time. Okay, moving on. So the next topic was decoupling from remuneration. There's heaps of resources and topics on this, and unfortunately there's too many online now, so it's getting diluted. So perhaps the best resource is to go back to the original book by John Doerr, which is Measure What Matters. And I think there's a whole chapter dedicated to this topic, but if you don't want to read the whole chapter, I'll just give you these sort of key points on it. So similar to setting bonuses for staff, you know, if you think like a sales team, right? And you've got a sales guy knows he can sell, she can sell 1,000 in the month, and comes to the KPI target meeting saying, well, can I have my bonus if I get to 500? And you're sort of having this haggle, right? So the same thing, if you start doing that with OKRs, it's no longer going to really stretch the team and the company. And on that second point, the whole idea of OKRs is to build collective commitment around what you're trying to achieve. And lastly, if you linking it to remuneration, similar to the first point, not only are you trying to reduce what you're stretching to, it really kills off risk taking. And setting yourself out to achieve something that hasn't been done before, to really reinvent the company, to launch something new, you know, that's taking risk. And if you're going to set those objectives, you don't want to be personally punished as an employee because you took that risk and it didn't quite come off. So lots of material online, lots of good articles. Unfortunately, since 2018, when OKRs have become really popular, you're seeing a little bit too many things written by folks that haven't been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years. You know, people new to it are publishing online. And so you're getting a lot of, you can balance it out and maybe just factor in a part of it to your remuneration package, and you're getting all this sort of dilution. But if you go right back to the source material, this started in the 60s, matured in the 90s, book was written in the 90s, I think, first version. So go back to the source and where this thinking was deep, and talk to practitioners that have been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years. They'll all say, do not link OKRs to remuneration. You may link KPIs to remuneration, the ongoing things you're measuring, because you want to maintain that cadence and focus on day-to-day operations and things that are important. So sales targets, number of widgets out of the factory, cost per unit, whatever it is, whoever's responsible for those things, you may give bonuses linked to KPIs. But with OKRs, it's building capabilities. It's doing something new that hasn't been done before in most cases. It's a one-off thing. It shouldn't be running every quarter. It should be just for the period that you're building this capability, launching, and then next quarter, you should be intervening on another set of KPIs to create OKRs to solve new opportunities or problems the next quarter. That's the thinking there. So just to give you some insight, Google does grade OKRs, so people have that sort of clarity around where they are taking risks and where they're not. So they use this method of just tagging the OKRs they're setting every quarter, which they have done since 96. I think every quarter, Google has done this since 96. Those of you drinking wine may be drinking more if I keep stopping to pause to drink coffee. So that's Google's method. You can read on the bottom right here. I just talk about, you know, Laszlo Bock talking about linking a third to remuneration, but then lots of caveats even on that, as you can read on the text there. So just don't recommend it. Really, so many other things to be linking bonuses and performance to, right? Context, team feedback, etc. So that's how Google does it. In terms of evaluating OKRs at the end of the quarter, really encourage you to get good at being binary in your assessment, unemotional. And Google certainly follows the original methodology here. Achieved or not achieved, just keep it simple. And if you want to watch the Vivino video, and we'll share this presentation afterwards in this link, the founder of Vivino does a great job of explaining how they do OKRs, and they just limit it to 2 OKRs for the quarter for the company, 2 or 3, no more. So they really focus on capability building and use all the resources on that. So yeah, one of the fastest growing apps in the world around wine, reviewing wine. And at the end of the quarter, they use 3 smiley faces, right? Happy, neutral, sad. So it's a bit more friendly, but it's also just black and white. Did we achieve it? Did we not achieve it? That's the culture you want to build. And then the next question is, what did we learn? And then what are we going to do next? So it's not sort of a punishing HR type process, right? You really want to step away from that, as I talked to before. Okay, so the Holy Grail. So next gen leaders, this is where it's all at. So learning how to connect strategy to objectives, OKRs, and the actual execution. So no good running this on a Google Sheet or a single use app, or having them somewhere where you just open them at the beginning and the end of the quarter. The whole trick is to bring this alive, and I'll show you how to do that now. So when you look at strategy and think about strategy development, figuring out the strategy, to executing the strategy, they're 2 totally different things, right? So I met a professor a couple of years ago who done a PhD recently and determined that there's 96 methods to develop strategy. And he'd written them all out, and some of them you recognize, right? SWOT analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And in that, then you look across to the consulting companies, and you've got Accenture, McKinsey, KPMG, BCG. I worked for Accenture for a period there. None of us can agree which is the best method to develop strategy. So there's no way a software company, or perhaps anyone on this call, is going to solve that worldwide. Many ways to develop strategy. But as you go to move into execution, there is some common themes and thinking coming together, and there's not 96 different ways to do it. And I think the main theme, and there's different methodologies here, right? Work breakdown structure, Hoshin Kanri in Japan, and then this strategy tree concept, which I'll show you now, which the pure strategy apps have embraced for some time now. So you've figured out where you're heading, and then it's about rallying around the execution. So you build your strategy out so people can rally around as a tree, and typically 3 to 6 goals at each level in the tree. Breaking down to 4 levels seems to work well, and it's not too overwhelming for people. And you write these in verb nouns. You've heard me say this before. We grew up with verb noun: wash the car, do your homework, clean the dog. It's an easy way for people to absorb information. And it's the same technique used in task management, project management, specifying, things that need to be done. So verb noun. So that's your strategy tree. Generally has an horizon of 1 to 3 years. And the key points here are the strategy tree should be live and interactive and never stopping. And I think the best proponent of this thinking is Richard Romalt. And if you want to read his book on good strategy, bad strategy, which goes back through the last 200-300 years of management theory, and then back to the Roman period as well. And it sort of traces how a lot of stuff we get excited about now is not new. It's just repackaged and gets more refined in the messaging and presentation. But a lot of the thinking's been there for quite some time. But his core underlying principle is to evolve and learn as you go. Don't get locked into big static plans and 5-year plan, and that's set, and that's what we're going to do. And it's first of all, it's not motivating. No one reads it. It's forgotten after a month. You want to make it alive and interactive, which I'll show you in a moment. One way to do it. So that's the strategy tree. This should be alive and interactive, whilst you continue to do your strat dev reviews and analysis regularly to inform what's happening in the market and what opportunities you could be pursuing in the market relative to your strengths. When you look at OKRs, people think they hang off the bottom of the strategy tree. And in practice, and now I'm really seeing a lot of these and work through with a lot of customers. So I'm getting to see the pattern in practice. What you decide to work on this quarter may be anywhere on your strategy tree. So you need to think of the things, they're 2 different things. So the leadership team continue to evolve the strategy tree whilst they're helping folks execute the OKRs. And the OKRs could be sitting anywhere on that tree. But the best thing for the staff and everyone in the company, and of course, the bigger the company, the more important this becomes, context and clarity. Why are we doing these OKRs? Well, it points to this sub-action, or it points to that action, or this one belongs to that goal, right? So you've got clarity around the context, and you can participate as a staff member or a team leader or anyone in the company can participate in the strategy tree evolution whilst rallying around what you're going to execute this quarter to build a new capability for the company. This is like the number one thing to get your head around. And I'll tell you why. So I mentioned 2018. That was the tipping point. So HBR.org, a lot of articles in that year if you want to go back and trace it. That was the tipping point where the world embraced OKRs. Who knows why, but it just happened. And then you had it taking off in Europe and the US particularly, and then Australia just sort of getting going maybe towards the end of 2020. And it's popping up in South Africa and Singapore. And I haven't been across Asia because of COVID. Normally I'd be able to talk to each country, but not at the moment. So, but really Europe and the US have really embraced this methodology. And if it's not linked to the strategy tree and you haven't got that context and the leadership team's still engaged on the strategy tree and questioning, hey, are these OKRs relevant? What should we be doing next quarter? And involved in the connection between the strategy tree and the OKRs. What happens over time is the OKR framework moves more into a HR process and it cascades down, and they use a single use app or a Google Sheet or something like that, or Smart Sheets, good product. And it just starts being a thing you've got to track and update, and then moves quickly into a HR process, then starts getting linked to remuneration. And in the end, the whole methodology is diluted, and you do not have the change that companies like Google and Amazon and many others, right, that have succeeded on this methodology. It just gets diluted, and that's the trap. So if there's one thing you take away from this video, it's just learning this, and then the next point on connection. So let's go back to our example. We've got this OKR for the quarter is linked to goal number 2, right? So this one actually does hang off the top of the tree instead of the bottom of the tree. And we saw that one before. So the Holy Grail now is to bring the execution together with the OKR, because that's where the rubber hits the road. Anyone can write out OKRs. It's just a question of skill as to how good you are and whether they look like to-do lists or they actually read like OKRs, which are more outcomes centric and something to aspire and rally and really challenge your mind as to how you're going to get to these outcomes. So when you think about it, day to day, you're going to have meetings. You're going to be interacting with questions, decisions, approvals, requests, things people need to be aware of, tasks, projects, ideas and challenges, risk management, all taking place through the quarter as you're trying to execute these OKRs. And if you can connect the work to the OKRs, then you'll actually have success with the execution, right? So the speed of decision-making, the clarity, nothing going off track, everything moving really, really quick. And that's kind of the whole thinking behind stratapp, which I'll just show you briefly. It's not the focus of the webinar. I'll recap the focus of the webinar. You're creating opportunities for everyone to lead through the work being connected to the OKRs, so everyone can see what's going on. And leaders get to coach and drop in and keep things on track and make sure it's all going at speed and not getting slowed down in anywhere with the implementation. And transparency and accountability are really important. And that's, again, bigger the organization, the harder that is to do. So if you can do it in a simple framework like this, then you really can move at speed no matter how big the company is. And just remember Ricardo Semler, right? Took over Semco in the 80s in Brazil as the dollar was frozen, the economy was collapsing. And I think there was 10,000 staff, many divisions, and he just broke it all down into simple groupings of 100 people, rallied everyone around simple objectives for each grouping, and turned the company around and into a global export success. So what we want to do is bring everyone together on the journey, and everyone with clarity and transparency on what we're trying to achieve without that sense that you're being tracked. So this doesn't become a HR process. That's that last point on the bottom there. We don't want staff to feel that this is like a hammer that's hanging over them for the quarter, right? It should be something we're aspiring to do. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that collective commitment is what it's all about, and one reason to decouple this from remuneration. So let's just have a look live at an example of exactly how to do this. And I said I would recap for those that want to jump off the webinar. So the first one is build the strategy tree before you go and do the OKRs. Second lesson is the OKRs can hang off any point in the tree, and in real world practice, that's what happens. It's not a cascade, it's not a full cascading effect. So once you've set the direction for the next 1 to 3 years on the strategy tree, you'll find the OKRs that you want to work on this quarter may sit anywhere. And that provides context and clarity for everybody. And the strategy tree should keep evolving, never be static, should keep evolving and constantly changing. And you can work on the tree, which I'll show you how to do in a moment. And then you're updating the OKRs against that tree every quarter. And then the Holy Grail is to connect the actual execution, the green boxes here, to the OKRs. So there's no running off and doing it in your own place. You know, these people are using this app, these people are using this app, I'm on pen and paper, information's everywhere, we're emailing each other, we're instant chat, we've got chat groups and messaging. Everything's all over the place, which is just how 99% of companies operate. So don't feel bad if you're in that bucket. But you have to eliminate that to really do this at speed. And I'll show you how to do that in the next 7 minutes and we'll wrap. So let's just bring this up here. So here's an example. So I'm on the strategy page. This is inside stratapp, so the shirt I'm wearing. So I'm going to show you how to do it in stratapp. And I'm going to show you those 3 things really quickly. So this company has this goal. They want to launch a brand. And if I click on it, it cascades down to these sub goals. And you see that it's written in verb noun. It's easy to follow. So anyone joining the company, so you think about staff induction, within a few minutes, I can see, hey, this is the plan for the company. What's wonderful here, in one click, here's a workspace live on that tree. Everything happening on that sub goal is at my fingertips. Let's have a drink. So you can see on the right-hand side, ideas, questions, approval requests. Remember those things like the interaction to execute here, it's all at my fingertips. So if I join this team, get replaced on this team, move into another team, build up the team, hire more people, instant effectiveness, rapid onboarding, changes. And literally in our company, we can onboard in 1 day, even without a lot of face time, because it's all clear who's working on what and what the plan is. And you can see under this sub goal, we've got these 2 objectives for the quarter. So if I go over to the OKR page here, there's those 2 objectives for the quarter. Validate demand, a bit similar to that Japanese example I did before. And then there's the key results. Again, quantitative and clear. And as you update these, that's orange at the moment. So if we updated this to that number of registrations, still behind, but overall we're green based on the weightings. This one's got a weighting of 2 to 1 times 1. You can cascade these down to as many levels as you like. Don't think you would in practice. The app has org design built into it. So you're able to build this up, these views up based on, hey, I just want to, you know, this is obviously doesn't have to, this works for 5 people or 500,000. So obviously you wouldn't have so much complication here if you're a smaller company. But let's say I just want to see the Italy, the goals related to Italy and ITC and marketing, click view and bang, they're going to show up here. Or I could just click there and see my teams. The thing that's really unique here is, again, in 1 click, I can open up this objective for the quarter to validate demand. And again, everything's at my fingertips. So we were on the strategy tree before and everything was at my fingertips and the user experience was the same as what you're seeing here. So the rate of learning for staff as they move through the product is super quick. And again, I can be working on this objective. I've got a bunch of tasks. And if I open the task, you'll see the experience is the same. And perhaps there's a workboard here. I want to set up a test website. Let's have a look at that. And now I'm into a workboard that's sitting below the objective. So if I just go back to the Holy Grail, we've got the goal, objective, key results, and now we're sitting on a project workboard that's below this objective. Okay, so all of the execution is directly connected to the OKRs. And that is the ultimate in execution and speed. Everything is connected. And if I open this guy up, I can see there's some subtasks, there's some conversations, and I could send this to my private workspace to work on today. And if we go to my private workspace, let's just jump out of here, close everything out. I'll go to the workspace. And there it is sitting on today. And I can add other things here as I plan my own day. So I'm Australian. It's not true, we work hard. But today I want to go home early. And tomorrow I want to review the February accounts. So this is my private workspace, and I can reorganize the workspace as I see fit. And if you're like me, what happens is things start hitting your workspace and you're like, wow, what is that? I don't even remember what that is. So I'll open it up and I go, oh, okay, a little bit of context. I remember this, kind of remember that. Belongs to this workboard. Okay, that's a project. Why are we doing that? There we go. I can get into the project, see all the tasks. I could read about it actually. I can read a comment on why and assumptions, milestones, everything to do with the project would be here. Go back to the task. So there's the task that hit my workspace. And then you think, well, why are we doing this project? It belongs to that objective to validate demand. Let's have a look at that. You go, okay, now I remember. So this project is contributing to this objective. So I've got context. If I'm on that project, I know why I'm doing it. And the leadership team and everyone else in the company has all of this at their fingertips. And you can, of course, you can lock things down with security. But you just see how easy it is to move through the app. No training, no onboarding, just get your content started, add people, and away you go. So there we are. I'm looking at this objective and you think, okay, why are we doing this objective? Well, it's part of this sub goal to validate the demand in the APAC region. And that was that sub goal on the strategy tree, validate demand on the APAC region. So let's go back to the strategy tree. Okay, so, and then if I look at that sub goal, I can see it belongs to the goal at the top of the tree to launch an online seafood brand. And in one click, I can open that up and it has its own workspace. And that's that one there. So at any point, there's a workspace in the hierarchy, everything's at your fingertips, and this is alive and interactive. So remember what I said before about Richard Rummel, probably the best proponent of this thinking. Keep your strategy tree alive and interactive. This is where you can, the leadership team get to play and you get to engage everyone. And you can even create challenges here too, right? So you could throw out a crowdsourcing challenge under here. It says, hey, I'm going to frame a challenge here. We're looking for ideas on how we can validate demand in Asia. Please just submit your ideas. And all these hierarchies just get created naturally below the content. So there's no rules. Wherever you put things, it just builds a natural hierarchy and you can go back to it. And then the Holy Grail is to connect strategy to OKRs and the actual execution. We will record the video, as some of you have asked in the chat. We'll make sure you got this intro deck, which has this thing. And we'll also include a link to the deck I used today, because you can use this internally as a reference point, right? Going through all this theory and might save you reading a couple of books. I'll tell you what, I've got 5 or 6 books on OKRs, which are fantastic. I'll include those in the mail out that goes out after the session. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great afternoon, evening in the States, and a very good late evening to you in the UK and South Africa, and all my colleagues in Australia. I hope you have a great Wednesday, 7:45. We're just getting started. Thanks very much, everyone.